because like all industries, particularly those that are within the prison industrial complex, in order for it to truly change, there has to be a disruption. And that disruption always comes in the form of money. Okay. And, when they say disruptor, money is what disrupts these type of industries, because once they are no longer able to be predators and be predatory and have to change their fee structures and how things are charged for, then that's when you start to get real change. People's voice. Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the People's Voice. I am Trey Evans, and I am the People's Voice. Thank you again for checking out the podcast this week. As always, it is greatly appreciated. As always, I start out with thank yous, and thank you again to everyone who has been listening to the podcast, who has been sharing the information, and also following up with comments. I greatly appreciate it. We greatly appreciate it. And hopefully we can continue to provide information that can be shared and utilized within our communities. To those of you who are listening to the podcast and watching the podcast for the first time, I say welcome and thank you for checking us out as well. It is greatly appreciated. As I always ask, if this information is enlightening and you do find it beneficial, please feel free to subscribe to the podcast so you can be notified when the podcast drops. And then also you can subscribe to us on YouTube as well. But thank you again. So today I want to talk about the prison industrial complex. And specifically, I want to break it down into one specific industry within the prison industrial complex. Now, for those who may know the term, you have an understanding. As always, I'm going to provide a definition for it, because I never assume that just because you've tuned in that you, and I'm saying you, those who are listening to the podcast, may know some of these subjects that we cover. I'll be honest with you. There are times when I'm covering these subjects and I'm discovering, their true meanings or what they actually stand for. So I'll provide a definition of what the prison industrial complex is. But specifically within the prison industrial complex, I want to talk about telecom companies, telecommunication companies, phone companies, and the rates that are being charged to incarcerated members and families to keep in touch. It is a huge, huge problem. And, with these podcasts, I try to give a high elevated version of some of these issues, because I'm telling you, if I went into in depth in some of these topics that we bring up here on the People's Voice, I'd be talking for 2, 3, 4 hours. I mean, it's so many intricacies. So I try to give a high level and then try to simplify it as much as possible, so it doesn't become boring, number one, and then number two, too overwhelming with stats and figures. So, but today I want to talk about telecom companies and what they're charging for communication rates for phone, video, and email. But in order to do that, first, I have to give a definition of what the prison industrial complex is, because within the prison industrial complex, there are multiple industries, and each of these industries are working to basically profit off of the many, many, many people here in the United States that are currently incarcerated. Many of you may know, many of you may not know, but the United States has some of the highest incarceration rates in the world. Matter of fact, in the world, they are number one in terms of incarceration of the citizens in their country. And because of that, there is an industry. Because as we all know, in a capitalist society, there is always room or always an opportunity to make money. It's just how you choose to make it, which is the difference between what I consider to be predatory and not predatory. But I'm not here to just pass judgment. I'm here to give information. So let me do that. So let me give you a definition of the prison industrial complex. So the prison industrial complex, and I'm just getting this right off of Wikipedia. I saw a few definitions, but one of the things I like about Wikipedia, I know you have to fact check this information. So a lot of times I just don't pull information off of Wikipedia, but in this particular case, they gave a very simplified definition after I did multiple checks on other sites. And so I decided to use this one for the broadcast. So I know there's some people that say Wikipedia and you kind of go, whoa, but trust me, this is the correct definition. So anyway, the prison industrial complex, it's a term used by scholars and activists to describe the relationship between a government and the various businesses that benefit from the institutions of incarceration. And those institutions can be jails, prisons, detention centers, facilities, psychiatric hospitals. So that's what the prison industrial complex is. It literally is business. It's literally businesses that work in line with local and state and federal governments to benefit off of institutions of incarceration. And when you're talking about institutions of incarceration, you're talking about human beings that are in these facilities. Now, it gets even more intricate because when you're talking about the incarcerated population, the greater amount of the incarcerated population here in the United States are black and brown people. And with the current immigration laws that are on the books, what you're starting to see is a huge increase in the number of Latino, Hispanic, and other nationalities that are coming into the country, air quotes, illegally. They're being detained in these detention centers. And a lot of these detention centers are beginning to benefit off of the prison industrial complex as well. But let me stay on topic. So today I want to talk about the telecom industry and the amounts that are being charged for calls and communication in the jail system. So I'm going to talk about that, talk about some of the features about that, and then talk about some of the things that have been done or are being done to try to alleviate the cost of communicating with incarcerated members. So first, let me tell you a little bit about the current telecom industry as it is constructed today. So the telecom industry, in terms of incarceration and in terms of the amount of money that is being made in this industry. Excuse me. So basically right now you have in the telecom correction industry, you have about 3 companies that make up the entire, I guess, the bulk of the industry in terms of the revenue, right? So right now, the revenue that's generated, and this is just from telecommunications, okay, within the incarceration system here in the United States, some estimates have it at almost $1.4 billion a year. And within that mixture, if you will, there are basically 3 companies that are benefiting from that $1.4 billion that's being generated each year from the telecom industry. And those 3 companies are You have a company called Global Tech. You have a company called Secures, and then you have another company called ICS Solutions. And these three companies are basically IC Solutions, excuse me. And these three companies basically control over 90% of the phone industry here in the United States. Now, you know, to say that that is monopolizing the market is an understatement, right? So you have these three companies that are dominating these industry. So why does this matter, right? Big deal. There's a couple of companies that have decided they saw a business opportunity and they've taken advantage of it. Well, here's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. The population that is often incarcerated are members that come from lower income and disproportionate communities, right? And so because of that, many of the families that are talking with the incarcerated members are trying to basically fit the bill to support their loved ones while they're in prison. Matter of fact, let me play this clip from, this is from CBS Richmond in Channel 8 News in Richmond. And I want you to hear this story of this one woman who was basically ended up going into debt because she was paying so much money just to speak with her loved ones. So take a listen to this, and then I'll continue going on from there. So let me go right here.
For Paletra James, an unconventional love story with an unexpected cost.
Over a 6-year period, I've spent about $40,000.
$40,000, she says, to stay in touch with her husband of 5 years behind bars and her son, who's also serving in state prison.
It is certainly a financial strain for me, especially when I'm a single income home.
And this is a common story that you hear repeatedly regarding families who are trying to stay in touch with their loved ones who are in prisons or in jails across the country. Now, these rates are astronomical in terms of, again, now keep this in mind. You're communicating with someone who this is their only link to the outside, right? Because, you know, part of the incarceration process is to isolate, right? You want to isolate people from society. That's part of the incarceration process. So now you have families that are paying astronomical rates because their loved ones are in prison. You know, this woman said for 6 years, she spent over $40,000. And let me break that down so you kind of understand how this is working. So, and again, like I said in the beginning, it's so many different layers to this, and I'm trying to keep it as simplistic as possible because, again, I don't want, anyone to kind of just tune out because this is very important information. So I'm just trying to hit the highlights. I don't want to get too in depth, but this is how this works. So in jail, there's a per minute fee for each call, right? So, and prisons, state-run prisons, local jails, they all have different fee structures. And because of that, you see a great fluctuation. And then state to state, there are different fee structures. So it really gets crazy. But so for instance, in the state of Florida, and let me pull the rates up so I can speak accurately to it. So on average, and I'm gonna go to let me go to Florida, or is it Alabama? I think Alabama had some of the highest rates. Yeah, it is Alabama. So let me in Alabama, for instance, this is just on average. The average 15-minute call. Okay, this is a 15-minute call. The average amount for a 15-minute call is $3.75. Right? $3.75. Now, I know there might be people listening and say, well, $3.75, that doesn't seem expensive, right? But when you start to do the math, and again, you're talking about Alabama, one of the poorest states in the United States. So you already know in terms of income where many of these people may be in terms of income. If you're talking to somebody 7 days a week, that's $26. Okay, 7 days a week. You think about for the month. You think about $26 a month. Now you're talking about, $26 a week. Now you're talking about $105 per month. Okay, and then at $105 per month, and you adding that up for a year, that's over $1,260 a year just to keep in communication with your loved ones. Okay. And again, these fees vary when it comes to state. I mean, it's all over the place. Now, in some states, like New Hampshire, for instance, it's only 20 cents for a 15-minute call, right? And then if you are looking at Kentucky, some estimates have it at almost $5, $5.70 per 15-minute call. These rates are astronomical, but again, why is it important? It's important because these rates and this mechanism is affecting individuals who are from low-income neighborhoods, particularly and especially Black and brown people, because Black and brown people have some of the highest incarceration rates in the United States, or I should say amongst the incarcerated population. So why is this so high? And now let me just note this as well. Now, rates fluctuate not only between states, but rates fluctuate between prisons and local jails. And why is that important? Well, let me explain. So recently, the FCC under President Biden, I believe this was last year, they signed in an act to reduce the per minute cap on calls from state-ran prisons, okay? And I think state-ran jails as well. But jails are usually local, so state-ran prisons. That went into effect last year. So the rate used to be capped at 21 cents. And these are for interstate calls, and I'll explain that in a second. So 21 cents per minute used to be the cap. So companies could charge up to 21 cents. Since FCC and Joe Biden put forth the act to reduce that amount, now it's limited at 12 cents per minute in large prisons and then 14 cents per minute in large jails for calls to and from other states. Now, again, that's interstate. When you start talking about intrastate, right? And I'm trying to keep it simple, guys. I know I'm giving a lot of information. Trust me, when I was researching it, I'm like, whoa, this is mind blowing. When you start talking about intrastate calls, these are in-state calls. Those calls are generally made from jails within that city, within that town. Those rates are not federally regulated. So you can get calls from jails that can go into, in terms of the dollar amount, can be astronomical. I was looking at a, what do you call it? I was looking at a graph, and again, this is from the Prison Policy Initiative. Okay, the Prison Policy Initiative. They did a kind of a graph of the cost of a 15-minute call from a local jail. Okay. The cost, just for instance, in Texas, the cost of a 15-minute call, right? And this is from a local jail, is $17.25. Okay. $17.25. Now, again, this is different than the calls interstate, right? I mean, this is different than the calls that are made from federally run prisons. Because again, in federally run prisons, the rates are much different. So just going back, as I said in my first example, in Alabama, in a federally run prison, the average rate for a 15-minute call, or the average amount for a 15-minute call, was $3.75. Matter of fact, let me pull up the amount that in Texas. So in Texas, from a federal jail, right, the average amount of a call, from a federal prison, the average amount of a call is 90 cents. But when you start getting into the local jail system, which again is not federally regulated, so the FCC and Joe Biden's act does not apply in these areas, because jails are state run for the most part. State or city run or city ran. The rates vary. So in Texas, from a local jail, a 15-minute call is $17.25. You can't tell me that is not astronomical. Now, here's the bigger problem. Why does that matter? Well, because 80% is estimated that 80% of jail and prison calls are considered intrastate, or 80% of calls usually take place from jails, because most of the population incarcerated are in jails. Jails are used to basically hold people until their court date. We talked a little bit about this in a previous podcast when I was talking about the bail system, the bail bond system here in the United States, and also bail reform. Because jail calls are much more expensive, okay, and then you have all of these individuals in jails, as you can see, the number can get very, very out of hand. Now, why is it so high, right? It's a phone call. Why is it so high? Well, going back, and I don't mean to jump back and forth, but going back, in many federally run and also in jails, the institution of incarceration get a kickback from these companies, right? So for instance, let's go back to Texas. Their federal prison system in Texas, they receive almost $6 million in kickbacks. And kickbacks is just another word for commissions, fee, however you want to describe it. So basically, Global Tech, who's one of the companies that provides, Global Tellink. I said Global Tech. Global Tellink, which is one of the companies that provide phone services in jails and prisons, they charge the incarcerated families these wild amounts. They raise the rates so that they can give a kickback to the jails and the prisons, basically saying, hey, thanks for letting us do business with you. And then the jail and the prison get their money. Everybody's happy. The company makes their money. Everybody's happy. But what's the problem? People are going in debt over these costs. As I played that clip from that CBS News in Virginia, where you heard the young lady talk about she was $40,000 in 6 years just trying to keep in touch with her family. Why is this important? So this is important because many studies have pointed out that keeping in touch with families helps to reduce recidivism. And recidivism is just the process of people who go back to jail, right? So, or jail or prison. The purpose of it, as they advertise it, is that it's supposed to be a center of rehabilitation. But to reduce, one of the ways they reduce recidivism is by helping people stay in touch. Matter of fact, let me play that clip as well. This is Bianca. I'm sorry, Bianca from the, where is Bianca from? Bianca is from the Prison Policy Initiative. And she talked a little bit about the process of keeping in contact and how that helps with recidivism in jails and in prisons. Take a listen.
With loved ones during their sentence.
Without that kind of contact, you lose all your connection to the outside world. And not only that, but your social connections get frayed to the point that when you come out of prison later, who do you have to call on, to get a contact to figure out where you're going to live, right? How do you get those connections that are going to get you a job?
And when I say they, individuals who run the institutions of incarceration understand this. And because this is so pivotal, this is why they have a stronghold on this industry, because they understand, again, those who run prisons and also the companies who provide this service, they understand how important it is for individuals to stay connected, which is why many of these egregious rates that they charge, they feel like they can justify it, and they'll make statements like, well, we firmly believe in families staying in touch, when in all honesty, they found a business that they could exploit, and they're using the incarcerated people and their families to elevate their financial standings because of this. So that's the issue that is currently going on in the prison industrial complex with telecommunication companies that are charging exorbitant amounts for phone calls. And this has been going on for quite a long time. So now where are we at? Let's progress the conversation. Okay, so I've kind of noted what the challenges are. Now, there has been a lot of progress recently that has been happening as a result of this. Matter of fact, currently there are 4 cities that have already begun to no longer charge for charge for calls from jails or from prisons. I believe that is San Francisco, New York, and I can't think, Los Angeles. And then one of the first states so far that has done away with charging inmates with calls, or charging inmates for calls, has been the state of Connecticut. And this is all recently. This is not something that has been, done. I should say all of these changes have really come recently. I think it's been probably here in the last couple of years that you're starting to see a huge push over changing the conversation and getting these rates down, because, as you know, there's been tons of conversation about changing incarceration, changing how we incarcerate, and other forms that have been put forth to kind of reduce the incarceration population. Now, in addition, not only have states and cities gone forth and started to make the change in terms of the amount that they're charging for these phone calls, but there's also been legislation that has been put forth to start the process on a even larger level to do away with these charges. Matter of fact, there is currently a act that has been recently passed, and this was introduced by Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois, excuse me. I've been saying Illinois, and y'all been killing me on that. It's not Illinois, it's Illinois. But again, Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois has been had introduced a act which is called the Martha Wright Reed Justice and Reasonable Communication Act. And this was introduced last year in 2021. And this was introduced basically to address the cost of phone calls that are currently taking place in incarcerated facilities here in the United States. And now this this act, it's passed committee. It's currently sitting within the representatives' floor. It hasn't been voted on as yet, but there has been substantial conversation around making this particular bill or particular act much more, I should say, pushing the conversation to assist with getting phone calls eliminated for loved ones and inmates who are in prisons. And this act was actually brought forth from a woman named Martha Wright Reed, and she had been fighting for well over 20 years to have phone calls rates reduced or eliminated altogether. And this was basically started because her grandson was in jail, and while she was trying to communicate with him, she was blind, or she is blind, and she could not write, letters or travel great distances to go see him. So she would make phone calls or accept phone calls, and it would just be too expensive. So she was definitely writing to try to get this done. But there is currently legislation that is out. So my recommendation is to look this up, find out what your state senator or representative is doing to kind of push this conversation forward so we can get this done. Last but not least, like I said, this has been a huge conversation, especially over the last 5 years. There's been a lot of changes, particularly since COVID. But there is a young man by the name of Zoe Orchawingo who has a company called Emilio. And what he's introduced is free video services, video call services for prisons and jails to eliminate fees for inmates and their loved ones, to help them communicate and stay in touch. So let me play that a little bit, and then we'll get out of here. So this is Zoe Orchawingo.
And then there's the incarcerated person who accesses our software either through a tablet that we provide the DOC or a Chromebook that might exist in that system. And then families on the outside download it through the mobile app store. And it's completely free of charge. We built all our technologies in-house, and that's what makes us uniquely different from the for-profit competitors. We're scaling 29 facilities now, which covers over 30,000 incarcerated people in 6 months of launching the product. So we're really confident that we can disrupt this industry and really lessen the burden that families are facing on the outside.
And that's exactly what you need. You need companies such as this one. It's called Emilio, and that clip was from Griot Politics. You need companies such as this that are disruptors in this industry, because like all industries, particularly those that are within the prison industrial complex, in order for it to truly change, there has to be a disruption. And that disruption always comes in the form of money. Okay. And, when they say disruptor, money is what disrupts these type of industries, because once they are no longer able to be predators and be predatory and have to change their fee structures and how things are charged for, then that's when you start to get real change. And here you have a company that is providing communication services at no charge to the individuals who are most affected, in order to create not only conversation, but to create change. And I applaud Emilio and Zoe for working on that. But you can keep in touch. You can go to Emilio. It's spelled Ameelio. This is not a commercial. I don't know the brother. I just thought it was great that he's working on that. So that is my time for today. I know this was a lot of information. I know it was a lot of information. I hope that I was able to break it down as simply as possible. Again, the problem is that these calls are expensive and families are literally going into debt trying to keep in touch with their loved ones. So whatever it is that you can do, organization wise, communication with your representatives, looking for other avenues, providing suggestions on how we can tackle this together, all suggestions and comments are greatly appreciated. And you can reach me on my social platforms at I am Trey Evans. That is IAMTREYEVANS. That is on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. And then you can reach us at Trey B Talking on Instagram. That's my time for today. So, as always, dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the people's voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute. People's voice.